Hi, everyone. So I've talked a bit before in previous videos about the Gokaden. The Gokaden is the appraisal structure that's used to evaluate Japanese swords, attribute them to different schools and time periods. And the Gokaden is based on 5 traditions that generally all schools are grouped into. You have Yamato, Yamashiro, Bizen, Sōshū, and Mino. It's a great high-level structure to understand the attribution of Japanese swords and categorize them. However, the reality of Japanese sword schools and swordsmiths, the way that they work stylistically, is a lot more complicated. And there are schools and groups that don't cleanly fit into that type of categorization. This is a really interesting sword and an interesting school. This is a Bitchū Aoe blade. Bitchū has its roots going back to basically the same parallel time period as Bizen. In the larger Bizen area, you have Bitchū, Bizen, and Bingo provinces all side by side in western Japan. The Aoe school, based in Bitchū, worked pretty much in parallel with Bizen and Kobizen. So the early part of the Aoe school, Ko-Aoe, was working in the same time period as Kobizen in the Heian period. And there are similarities between the way that they worked across the two schools. And in terms of where the Osafune village, the main village of Bizen, worked, and the Aoe smiths, you're talking about 35, 40 kilometers in distance, so relatively the same area. So I'm going to be talking a bit about Aoe with this blade, a little bit of background, and then I'll talk about the workmanship in this particular Aoe blade. So the Bitchū Aoe school actually begins in Fukuyama, which is a village, an area of Bizen, before they move into the neighboring Bitchū province. That area of Bizen and Bitchū is really optimal for the production of Japanese swords. And the reason for that is that you have 3 rivers that come together. You have cascading iron sand that comes down from the mountains into an area that is easy for swordsmiths to be able to gather and use for the production of their Japanese swords. This iron sand was excellent for producing high-quality swords, and that is one of the main reasons that the Bizen and related schools became so dominant in the early part of Japanese sword production. If you look at across all of the blades that have passed Juyo, 40% of those blades are coming from this particular area of Bitchū and Bizen. So that shows you the high level of skill, craftsmanship, and material that were available to those swordsmiths. So as far as Aoe specifically, as I mentioned, began in Mizu and Fukuyama in Bizen, moved into the neighboring Bitchū province in the same area, have access to the same production materials. You can see if you look at the blades that were selected for, or the swordsmiths rather, that were selected to work with Emperor Go-Toba when he was producing swords at the end of the early part of the Kamakura period, that Aoe smiths were already receiving a lot of acclaim and recognition. From the first of the 8 swordsmiths that worked with Go-Toba, 3 of them came from Aoe. And if you look at the 12 swordsmiths that Go-Toba worked with at that time, you have Ichimonji, you have Kobizen, you have Aoe, you have early Wataguchi. Those are all the luminaries of the time period. So Bitchū Aoe was classified in that same level of recognition and appreciation for their skill and craftsmanship as some of the other early masters of Japanese sword production. So there are a few attributes that I would say can distinguish or identify Aoe blades as unique or serve as the basis for the recognition of their quality. Aoe blades tend to have a very beautiful type of utsuri called dan utsuri. And what that means is that when you're looking at the blade, utsuri means reflection. And you see utsuri, the term used very often in connection with Bizen blades. So with the Bizen blade, you'll have the edge, you'll have the hamon, the hardened area, and then you'll have a misty or whitish kind of reflection of the hamon that appears in the ji. It can be like a whitish band, sometimes it is straight. Bo utsuri, sometimes it becomes a shape that reflects the hamon itself. So you have a waving utsuri, midare utsuri, or choji utsuri on the top. That is one kind of utsuri. And utsuri is expressed in different ways. In Yamashiro blades, you have nie utsuri. In Aoe blades, you have dan utsuri, which is something that you see in many high-quality Aoe blades. And what that means is that you end up getting these stripes or layered bands of utsuri that, as you're moving the blade in light, have different kinds of effects and look three-dimensional. My friend has a really beautiful Aoe Naotsugu, and one of the most striking aspects of that particular Juyo Aoe blade is the prominent and vivid dan utsuri in the blade. So that is one. Another is the characteristic forging and the appearance of the ji-hada. The ji-hada in Aoe blades is called generally chirimen-hada, which is like crepe silk. So if you look at the steel of the blade, it is very finely forged, and it has a textured appearance of the fine forging layered by a thick coating of jinie that gives the appearance of chirimen or crepe silk. Later, you also see a different kind of ji-hada in Aoe blades called namazu-hada, which looks like the skin of a catfish. It's dark, it has a very consistent, almost oily appearance to the steel, and then again coated with jinie on the surface. So that's number two, the characteristic forging styles in ji-hada that you see in Aoe blades. The last of the characteristics of Aoe that you see in many of their blades is a sumi-hada. And sumi-hada will appear, it doesn't look like a typical shingane where you'll have core steel coming through, but you'll see areas of the steel that are darker and more featureless. So kind of have a flatter, darker appearance. It almost looks like inlaid pieces of dark steel in the blade itself. You'll have a tight chirimen forging, you'll have a tight ji-hada, and within that you'll have areas that have a different type of appearance, and that sumi-hada is another characteristic that you would see and you would kante or evaluate to the Aoe school. So as I mentioned, the Gokaden, the 5 traditions, they fold a lot of other schools and swordsmiths into that classification, but it's a lot more complicated than 5 different distinct traditions. In terms of Aoe, Aoe will be classified in the Gokaden as a Yamashiro-den school. However, they worked in Bizen. There are similarities to Bizen, and at the same time, they really merit their own type of classification. It becomes more like a Bitchū-den instead of a Yamashiro-den or a Bizen-den. Because their way of working became distinctive, you see features in their work that are different from what you see in other schools, and they worked in many different ways. They're a very distinctive school. One of the areas that you see their distinctiveness is how they sign their blades. Typically, when you're looking at tachi of the time period, if they are signed on the tachime of the blade. So if the blade mount is being worn, you would have the nakago like this. The signature would be on the tachi side facing outward. The Bitchū Aoe smiths signed in a contrary way to basically almost anyone else working at the time period on the katana side. That doesn't mean that they were worn as a katana, but the Aoe smiths decided that they would do something in terms of signing their blades that is distinctive or different. So it's one of their unique characteristics. So as far as the evolution of Aoe blades over time and what you see, as far as the shape of the early blades, you will find them to be similar to Kobizen. They tend to be in the Ko-Aoe or the early Aoe period from Heian, very elegant, slender blades, deep koshizori. You'll see that the deepest part of the sori goes through the habakimoto, so sori would be deepest part lower down into the nakago, and that area around where the habaki is would be generally the deepest part of the sori. Over time, the shape evolves to something more reflective of overall trends and traditions with Japanese sword sugata. As you get into the Nanbokuchō period, the blades will become very robust. The Juyo Naotsugu that I mentioned, Aoe Naotsugu I mentioned in Friend's collection, is wide and thin. It has more of a Nanbokuchō classical shape to it. So in some sense, it is carrying through the stylistic changes over time. This blade is a Bitchū Aoe, Tokubetsu Hozon with Saigaki, which dates to around the Nanbokuchō period. The classification of Aoe is Ko-Aoe is the earliest part from Heian to the very earliest Kamakura. As you're getting into Nanbokuchō period, that is the middle Aoe or the Chu Aoe school, and then you have Sui Aoe, which is later. But generally, when you're talking about Aoe, you're talking about late Heian through Kamakura into Nanbokuchō. So this blade is a really beautiful piece. It's very, very healthy. It shows the traits that you would expect to see during the Nanbokuchō period. So it's a wide blade. It's a very robust shape. The hamon, as you would typically see for the later part of Aoe, is suguha based. So it's a straight hamon, and I'll be updating to show detailed videos as well. Straight with a lot of ashi. So if you look at the hamon, and you'll be able to see this in the detailed videos, you have these bands that go perpendicular towards the edge called ashi. And overall, the hamon is straight and consistent all the way through to the boshi, and then the boshi is a komaru boshi. And the ji-hada on the blade is that kind of typical Aoe, very tight, very thickly covered with ji-nie, and there is utsuri, which I'll do my best to capture in videos and photos. And overall, it's a very healthy representative example of Aoe workmanship. Now this blade is osuriage, so it was a much longer katana or odachi when it was made in the Nanbokuchō period. It has been shortened, but it's been shortened in a way that resembles a Bizen nakago. So you would almost see this shape and you would think that this is a sui Bizen blade or a muromachi Bizen blade from the way it has been finished. But it's a much earlier piece. It predates sui Bizen, and it shows all those characteristic traits of what you would expect to see in Nanbokuchō Aoe. So I will update my website with additional photos and videos, and I will be posting this soon with detail as well, so that all the workmanship and characteristic attributes can be seen. All right, well, thank you so much. I'll post more videos soon. Thanks.